$1.87 تمام پولی بود که اون داشت. دوستان نازنینم سلام. امروز میخوام براتون قصه شب کریسمس رو بگم. امیدوارم که دوست داشته باشید. با ما همراه باشید. $1.87 $1.87 That was all. همه پولی بود که داشت. And 60 cents of it و 60 سنت از اون was in pennies. به صورت سکه های 1 پنی بود. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time. سکه های پنی که دونه به دونه جمع کرده بودش. At a time by bulldozing the grocer. موقعی که میرفت پیش خاروبار فروش. And the vegetable man یا مرد سبزی فروش. And the butcher و یا میرفت پیش قصاب. Until one's cheeks burned. تا وقتی که گونه های یکی از اون دو نفر قرمز میشد. With the silent imputation. با یک انگار که تو دل خودش میگفت پارسیمونی ای خسیس. That such close dealing implied. که این از ویژگی های معامله های روزمره است. 3 times Della counted it. 3 بار دلا پولا رو شمرد. $1.87 $1.87 And the next day would be Christmas. و فردا کریسمس بود. There was clearly nothing to do. هیچ کاری نمیشد کرد. But flop down on the shabby little couch. غیر از اینکه خودش رو انداخت روی کاناپه و شروع کرد به حق حق زدن. Flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. و شروع کرد به گریه کردن. So Della did it. و دلا هم همین کار کرد. Which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs. که این به خوبی این رو به نمایش میگذاشت که زندگی تشکیل شده از sobs، حق حق ها، sniffles، فین فین کردن ها and smiles و لبخند ها. Which sniffles predominating. که البته فین فین کردن هاش بیشتر بود. While the mistress of the home موقعی که بانوی خونه is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second داشت از مرحله اول میرفت به مرحله دوم، یعنی به جای که حق حق کنه شروع کرده بود به فین فین کردن. Take a look at the home. یه نگاهی به خونه انداخت. A furnished flat. خونه که مبله بود. At $8 per week. و اجارش $8 در هفته بود. In the vestibule below, توی راهروی پایین was a letter box. یه جعبه پستی بود. Into which no letter would go. که هیچ نامه‌ای هیچ وقت اون تو انداخته نشده بود. And an electric button. و یک زنگ الکتریکی from which no mortal finger. که هیچ وقت هیچ بنی بشری from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. هیچ بنی بشری دستش رو روی اون زنگ نگذاشته بود. Also appertaining thereunto. و همچنین چسبیده به اون یه چیزی بود. چی بود حالا؟ Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name. یه کارتی بود که روش یه اسم نوشته شده بود. Mr. James Dillingham Young. آقای جیمز دیلینگهام یانگ. The Dillingham had been flung. کلمه دیلینگهام انگار که متعلق بود had been flung to the breeze during a former period. به یک زمانی در گذشته. A former period of prosperity. زمانی که آقای دلینگهام پولدار بود. prosperous بود. prosperity داشت. When its possessors was being paid $30 per week. و زمانی که صاحبین این نام $30 در هفته حقوق می گرفتن. یعنی وضعشون خیلی خوب بوده. Now, حالا when the income was shrunk to $20, حالا که پولشون رسیده بود به هفته $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred. کلمات حروف کلمه دلینگهام انگار که محو شده بود و کمرنگ شده بود. As though they were thinking seriously. و انگار که این حروف ها شروع کرده بوده پیش خودشون به جدیت فکر کردن که contracting to a modest and unassuming D. که همین یک حرف D ازش باقی بمونه کافیه. یعنی داره تعریف میکنه خیلی خوشگل و خیلی قشنگ داره برای ما تعریف میکنه که این درآمدشون که کم شده انگار حتی نام خانوادگیشون هم دیگه نمیتونست دیگه اون ابهت و طمطراق خودش رو حفظ کنه و انگار کوچیک شده بود. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home, ولی هر وقت که آقای جیمز دلینگهام برمیگشت به خونه and reached his flat above و به آپارتمانش میرسید و وارد آپارتمانش میشد, he was called Jim. اسمش جیم بود. دیگه جیمز دلینگهام نبود. بهش میگفتن جیم. And greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young. و با مهربونی توسط خانم دلینگهام در آغوش کشیده میشد. Already introduced to you as دلا. که قبلا در مورد خانم دلینگهام باهات صحبت کردم. درسته. دلا. Which is all very good. و این خیلی خوبه. دلا finished her cry. دوباره بریم سراغ دلا که داشتیم براتون میگفتیم. دلا finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. دلا گریه‌ش رو گذاشت کنار و رفت سراغ پودر سرخابش رو با پودر سرخاب یه حالی به گونه هاش داد. Attended her cheeks. یعنی شروع کرد توجه کردن به گونه هاش. She stood by the window and looked out. کنار پنجره وارساد و به بیرون نگاه کرد. At a grey cat. به یک گربه خاکستری. Walking a grey fence. که روی فنس های خاکستری راه میرفت. In a grey backyard. توی یه حیاط خاکستری. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day. فردا روز کریسمس بود. And she had only $1.87. و اون فقط $1.87 پول داشت. With which to buy Jim a present. به نظر با این $1.87 چیکار میخواست کنه؟ بله، میخواست برای جیم هدیه کریسمس بخره. She had been saving every penny. هر یک سنتی که تونسته بود یا هر یک پنی که تونسته بود رو جمع کرده بود. She could for month. برای ماه‌ها این پول رو کنار گذاشته بود. With this result, $20 a week doesn't go far. با هفته $20 خیلی نمیتونست پول جمع کنه و این بیشترین پولی بود که تونسته بود جمع کنه. Only $1.87. And she wanted to buy something really good for his husband. و اون میخواست یک چیز خیلی خوب برای همسرش بخره. For her husband. برای همسرش. Something fine and rare and sterling. یه چیز تک و شیک و خاص. Something just a little bit near. یه چیزی که خیلی نزدیک باشه to being worthy of the honor و این افتخار رو داشته باشه being owned by Jim که متعلق باشه به جیم. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. یه آینه قدی نازک بین دو تا پنجره هایی که تو اتاق بود وجود داشت. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass. ممکنه که قبلا از این آینه قدی ها دیده باشی. In this mirror, Della could see. توی این آینه دلا میتونست خودش رو ببینه. Could see herself in this mirror every day. پس آینه‌ای بودش که دلا هر روز میتونست خودش رو توی این آینه ببینه. Suddenly she whirled from the window. یک دفعه از سمت پنجره پرید به سمت آینه. And stood before the glass. و وایستاد جلوی آینه. Her eyes were shining brilliantly. چشماش داشت برق میزد. But her face had lost its color. ولی صورتش رنگ خودش رو از دست داده بود. Within 20 seconds. تنها در 20 ثانیه. Rapidly she pulled down her hair. به سرعت موهاشو پایین انداخت. And let it fall to its full length. و اجازه داد که موهاش کامل باز بشه. Now there were two possessions. حالا دو تا چیز بود که خانواده دلینکام بهش افتخار میکردن. Two possessions of the James Dillingham Young in which they both took a mighty pride. که جفتشون زن و شوهر خیلی بهش افتخار میکردن. One was Jim's gold watch. یکی از اونا ساعت طلای جیم بود. That had been his father's که متعلق به پدرش بود and his grandfather's و اون هم از پدر بزرگش به ارث رسیده بود بهش. The other was Della's hair. دیگری موهای دلا بود. حالا اینجا ببین چه تعبیر قشنگی استفاده میکنه. Had the Queen of Sheba lived. اگر که ملکه سبا توی همسایگی اونا زندگی میکرد. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft. در همسایگی اونا زندگی میکرد. Della would have let her. و دلا اجازه میداد که her hair hang out the window. موهاش از پنجره بیاد به پایین. Someday to dry. یه روزی موهاش از پنجره بده پایین تا موهاش خشک بشه. Just to depreciate her majesty's jewels and gifts. به راحتی موهای زیبای دلا میتونست با کل دارایی ملکه سبا برابری کنه. داره میگه موهای دلا انقدر زیبا بود. Had King Solomon been the janitor. و اگر که آقای و سلیمان نبی و حالا میخواد پای سلیمان نبی رو میکشه وسط و دارایی سلیمان نبی رو با ساعت جیم میخواد مقایسه کنه. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures. و اگر سلیمان نبی تمام دارایی و طلاهاش رو piled up in the basement توی زیرزمین جمع میکرد. Jim would have pulled out his watch. همین که جیم رد میشد و ساعتش رو از جیبش میکشید بیرون. Every time he passed. هر دفعه که رد میشد. Just to see him pluck at his bird from envy. میتونست ببینه که سلیمان نبی از خجالت و حرص کامل قرمز شده. این تعبیر خوشگل و نویسنده برامون استفاده کرد تا ارزش موهای دلا و ارزش ساعت جیم رو برای ما به تصویر بکشه. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her. حالا که موهای زیبای دلا به پایین افتاده بود. Rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. مثل یک آبشار قهوه‌ای رنگی بود که به پایین می اومد. It reached below her knee. و تا پایین زانوهاش ادامه داشت. And made itself almost a garment for her. و مثل جامه‌ای بود بر تن دلا. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. و دلا دوباره موهاش رو باز کرد و به پایین انداخت با اضطراب و خیلی سریع. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still تا اینکه یه لحظه یهو خشکش زد. While a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. و یکی دو تا قطره اشک از روی گونه هاش ریخت روی فرش. به نظر چیکار میخواد بکنه؟ On went her old brown jacket. ژاکت قهوه‌ای قدیمیش رو به تن کرد. On went her old brown hat. کلاه قدیمی قهوه‌ایش رو به سر گذاشت. With a whirl of skirt. و با یه چرخی که به دامنش داد. With brilliant sparkles still in her eyes. با اون برقی که هنوز توی چشمانش بود. She fluttered out the door. از در زد بیرون. And down the stairs. و رفت به پایین پله ها. To the street. و وارد خیابان شد. Where she stopped the sign read مم صفرانی. تا اینکه رفت و به یه تابلوی رسید که روش نوشته بود خانم صفرانی. Hair goods of all kind. کلاگیز فروشی بود. One flight up, Della ran. به سرعت پله ها رو رفت بالا and collected herself panting. و خودش رو جمع و جور کرد. Madam large, too white, chilly. خانم صفرانی یه خانم چاق بود، سفید بود و یکم هم ترش رو بود. Hardly looked at صفرانی. دلا یه نگاهی به خانم صفرانی انداخت. Will you buy my hair? موامو میخری؟ Asked دلا. دلا گفت. I buy hair. من مو میخرم. said madam. خانم صفرانی جواب داد. Take your head off. کلاتو وردار. And let's have a sight at the looks of it. بذار یه نگاهی به موهات بندازم. Down rippled the brown cascade. آبشار موهای دلا به پایین ریخت. $20. $20. said madam. خانم صفرانی گفت. Lifting the mass with a practiced hand. همینطوری که موها رو به دستش گرفته بود. Give it to me quick. دلا said. رد کن بیاد. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by one rosy wings. و 2 ساعت بعد مثل برق و باد گذشت. Forget the hash metaphor. نویسنده اینجا داره برامون صحبت میکنه. میگه نمیخواد خیلی به اشاراتی که آوردم فکر کنی. She was ransacking the store for Jim's presents. تمام مغازه ها رو گشت و گشت تا بتونه هدیه جیم رو پیدا کنه. She found it at last. آخر پیدا کرد. It surely had been made for Jim. حتما برای جیم ساخته شده بود. And no one else. و نه هیچ کس دیگه. There was no other like it in any of the stores. هیچ چیزی شبیه به اون تو هیچ کدوم از اون مغازه ها نمیتونستی پیدا کنی. And she had turned all of them inside out. تمام مغازه ها رو دونه به دونه گشته بود. It was a platinum fob chain. یه زنجیر طلای سفید. Simple and chaste in design. ساده ولی بکر و زیبا و طراحی خیلی زیبایی داشت. Properly proclaiming its value. که به زیبایی ارزشش رو نشون میداد. By substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation. یعنی داره میگه خود اون زنجیر اونقدر ارزشمند و زیبا بود و کامل برازنده بود و این زلمزینبوهای بدلی نبود که از دور میدرخشه ولی وقتی که میای نزدیک میبینی بدلیه. As all good things should do، که تمام چیزهای ناب باید همین شکلی باشن. It was even worthy of the watch. ارزش اون زنجیر با ارزش ساعت کاملا برابری میکرد. As soon as she saw it، به محض که دیده بودش، she knew that it must be Jim's. متوجه شده بود که حتما این زنجیر باید به جیم تعلق داشته باشه. It was like him. زنجیر خیلی شبیه به جیم بود. Quietness and value. سکوت و اعتبار. The description applied to both. این تعبیر هم برای زنجیر بود و هم برای جیم. $21 they took from her for it. $21 از دلا بابت زنجیر گرفتن. And she hurried home. و با سرعت برگشت به خونه. With the 87 cents. با 87 سنتی که توی جیبش براش مونده بود. With that chain on his watch. با اون زنجیر روی ساعتش. Jim might be properly anxious. حتما از این به بعد جیم خیلی مشتاق و کنجکاو میشد در مورد زمان. Anxious about the time in any company. از این به بعد هر جا که میرفت یعنی که هی ساعتش رو نگاه میکرد. حالا چرا؟ He sometimes looked at it on the sly. قبلا وقتی که به ساعتش نگاه میکرد یه ذره شرمنده بود. انگار یه ذره خجالت میکشید. On account of the old leather strap. به خاطر اون بند چرمی کهنه‌ای که روی کنار ساعت بود. That he used in place of a chain. که به جای زنجیر از اون بند چرمی کهنه استفاده میکرد. When Della reached home. وقتی که دلا رسید به خونه her intoxication gave away a little. اون حالت سرمستیش دیگه یکم پریده بود و رفته بود. Her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. و به jay اون عقل و منطق جایگزین شده بود. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny clothes-lying curls. در عرض 40 دقیقه موهاش پر از فرای ریز و کنار هم بود. That made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. که باعث می شد به خوبی شبیه یه پسر بچه‌ای باشه که از مدرسه فراریه. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. به تصویر خودش توی آینه نگاه کرد. Long, carefully and critically. طولانی مدت، با دقت و نکته بینانه. If Jim doesn't kill me. اگه جیم منو خفه نکنه. She said to herself. با خودش فکر کرد. Before he takes a second look at me. قبل از اینکه نگاه دوم به من بندازه. He'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. به حتما پیش خودش میگه که شبیه دخترای کور کونی آیلند شدم. دخترای گروه کور کونی آیلند اگر که سرچ کنید یه سری دختریان که میرقصن و موهای خیلی کوتاه و فرفری دارن. But what could I do? ولی چیکار میتونستم بکنم؟ What could I do with $1.87? آخه با $1.87 چیکار میتونستم بکنم؟ At 7 o'clock the coffee was made. ساعت 7 شب قهوه آماده بود. And the frying pan was on the back of the stove. و مایتابه سرخ کردنی روی گاز بود. Hot and ready to cook the chops. داغ و آماده برای پختن دنده های کبابی. Jim was never late. جیم هیچ وقت دیر نمی اومد. Della doubled the fob chain. زنجیر رو توی دستش دولا کرد in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door. و گوشه ای از میز نزدیک در نشست. The door that he was always entered. دری که جیم همیشه ازش وارد می شد. Then she heard his step on the stairway. بعد صدای قدم های جیم رو روی راپله شنید. And she turned white for just a moment. و دلا برای یک لحظه رنگش پرید. She had a habit for saying little silent prayers. یه عادتی داشت این بودش که همیشه دعا برای چیزای ریز تو زندگیش دعا میخوند. She had a habit for saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things. در مورد چیزای روزمره همیشه دعا میکرد. And now she whispered. و حالا زیر زبونش زمزمه کرد. Please God, make him think I'm still pretty. خدایا ازت خواهش میکنم یه کاری کن که فکر کنه هنوز خوشگلم. The door opened. در باز شد. And Jim stepped in. و جیم به داخل اومد. And closed the door. و در رو پشت سر خودش بست. He looked thin and very serious. خیلی لاغر و جدی به نظر می رسید. Poor fellow. مرد بیچاره. He was only 22. فقط 22 سال داشت. And to be burdened with the family. و باری خانواده رو باید به دوش می کشید. He needed a new overcoat. به یه اوورکوت تازه احتیاج داشت. And he was without gloves. دستکش هم نداشت. Jim stopped inside the door. جیم وسط در ایستاد. As immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. مثل یه سگ شکاری که بوی کبک به مشامش رسیده بود همینجوری خشکش زد. His eyes were fixed upon Della. چشماش روی دلا همینجوری خیره وایساده بود. And there was an expression in them. و یه تعبیری توی چشماش بود. In them that she could not read. که دلا نمیتونست بفهمتش. And it terrified her. و این دلا رو ترسوند. It was not anger. خشم نبود. Nor surprise. غافلگیر هم نشده بود. Nor disapproval. حتی مخالفت هم نبود. Or horror. یا ترس. Nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. یا هر کدوم از اون احساساتی که دلا خودشو برای اونا آماده کرده بود. He simply stared at her. به سادگی به دلا خیره شد. Fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. همینجوری ثابت و خیره با اون تعبیری که توی چشماش بود. Della wriggled off the table. دلا از روی صندلی پرید بیرون و went for him. رفت به سمت همسرش. Jim darling. Jim عزیزم. دلا said. Don't look at me that way. اینجوری به من نگاه نکن. I had my hair cut off. موامو کوتاه کردم and sold it. و فروختم. Because I couldn't have lived through Christmas. به خاطر که نمیتونستم از کریسمس لذت ببرم without giving you a present. بدون که یه هدیه‌ای به تو داده باشم. It'll grow out again. دوباره بلند میشه. You won't mind. نگران نباش. Will you? نگرانی؟ I just had to do it. مجبور بودم این کار بکنم. My hair grows awfully fast. قول میدم موهام زود بلند میشه. Say beautiful nice gift I've See this beautiful nice gift I've got for you. همینجوری دلا تون حرف میزد و میخواست موضوع رو عوض کنه و یهو اومد گفتش که ببین چه هدیه قشنگی برات خریدم. You cut off your hair? جیم با تعجب صدا کرد ما تو کوتاه کردی؟ As if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet. انگار که هنوز دوش نیفتاده بود و هنوز هاج و واج بود نمیدونست چی به چیه. گفت موهاتو کوتاه کردی؟ And after the hardest mental labor. و انگار هنوز این براش تو مخش جا نیفتاده بود. Cut it off and sold it. کوتاه کردم و فروختمش. دلا گفت. Don't you like me just as well anyway? همطور که هستم دوستم نداری؟ I'm me without my hair. Ain't I? هنوز خودمم. حتی بدون موهام. نه؟ Jim looked about the room curiously. جیم یه نگاه کنجکاوانه‌ای به اتاق انداخت و You say your hair is gone? داری میگی موهات پرید رفت؟ جیم گفت With an air almost of idiocy. و این جملهش خیلی احمقانه به نظر می اومد. You needn't look for it. بی خود دنبالش نگرد. دلا گفت It's sold. فروختم رفت. I tell you sold and gone too. فروختمشو تموم شد رفت. I tell you sold and gone too. دارم بهت میگم فروختم و رفت. It's Christmas Eve boy. شب کریسمس پسر. Be good to me. با من خوب باش. For it went for you. موهامو به خاطر تو کوتاه کردم. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered. ممکنه که موهام قابل شمارش باشه. She went on with sudden serious sweetness. با اون لحن شیرینش ادامه داد. But nobody could ever count my love for you. ولی هیچ کس نمیتونه میزان عشقم به تو رو بشماره. Shall I put the chops on Jim? برم شما بذارم؟ دختر زبلیه. Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. جیم انگار که از خواب بیدار شده بود. He unfolded his دلا رو در آغوش کشید. $8 a week or a million a year. $8 در هفته یا میلیون ها در یک سال. What is the difference? فرقش چیه؟ A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. یه اقتصاددان یا یه آدم خیلی باهوش جواب درستی نمیتونه بهت بده. Jim drew a package from his overcoat. جیم یه پاکت از اوورکوتش در آورد and threw it upon the table و پرتش کرد روی میز. Don't make any mistakes, دل اشتباه نکن. جیم گفت About me, I don't think there's anything. اگه منم که برام فرقی نمیکنه in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo. اینکه موهاتو کوتاه کنی یا بتراشی یا شامپو عوض کنی. That could make me like my girl any less. هیچ کدوم از اینا باعث نمیشه که عشقم رو کمتر دوست داشته باشم. But if you'll unwrap that package. ولی اگه بری اون بسته رو باز کنی you may see why you had me going a while at first. میفهمی که چرا انقدر تعجب کردم. White fingers and nimble. با دستانی سفید و چالاک tore at the string and paper. اون نوارها و کاغذ هدیه رو باز کرد and then a scream of joy. و بعد از شور و علاقه یه جیغی کشید and then alas. و بعد افسوس خورد. A quick feminine change. یک تغییر ناگهانی کاملا زنانه. To hysterical tears and wails. از شادی به غم. Necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. که نیازمند این budش که همسرش ماجرا رو آروم کنه و سر و سامون بده و با آرامش بره بغلش کنه و ساکتش کنه. For their lady combs. شونه ها اونجا بود. The set of combs. اون ست زیبای شانه ها. Side and back. کنار هم قرار داده شده بود. That Della had worshipped long in Broadway window. که دلا همیشه میرفت تو خیابون برادوی و از پشت پنجره ها تحسینشون میکرد. Beautiful combs. شانه های فوق‌العاده زیبا. Pure tortoise shell. که از جنس لاک پشت بود. With jeweled rims. که با جواهر تزیین شده بود. Just a shade to wear and beautiful vanished hair. و رنگ زیبایی داشت که با موهای قهوه‌ای دلا خیلی می اومد. They were expensive combs. شانه های خیلی گرونی بود. She knew. دلا می دونست. And her heart had simply craved and yearned over them. و قلب دلا همیشه برای اونا می تپید و از ته دلش همیشه می خواست که اونا رو داشته باشه. Yearned over them without the least hope of possession. همیشه این آرزو رو داشت ولی هیچ وقت حتی به ذهنش هم خطور نکرده بود که آرزوش برآورده بشه. And now they were hers. و الان اون شونه ها متعلق بود به دلا. But the hair was gone. ولی موها رفته بود. But she hugged them to her bosom. دلا شونه ها رو گذاشت رو قلبش. And at length she was able to look up with a dim eyes and a smile. و با چشمای نیمه باز و لبخند به شونه ها نگاه کرد. My hair grows so fast, Jim. موام دوباره بلند میشه جیم. نگران نباش. And then Della leaped up like a little sun cat and cried, oh. و دلا مثل یک گربه خونگی یهو پرید و گفت راستی. Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. جیم هنوز هدیه‌های زیباش رو ندیده بود. She held it out to him eagerly. Opened her open palm. زنجیر رو کف دستش گذاشت و مشتاقانه به جیم نشون داد. The dull precious metal seemed to flash white, a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. اون فلز بی زبون شروع کرد به درخشیدن و این درخشش فقط بابت درخشش روح و والایی روح دلا بود. Isn't it a dandy, Jim? خوشگل نیست جیم؟ I hunted all over town to find it. کل شهر رو برای پیدا کردنش گشتم. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. از این به بعد روزی 100 بار باید ساعتت نگاه کنی. Give me your watch. ساعتتو بده. I want to see how it looks on it. میخوام ببینم که به ساعتت میاد. Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch. به جای اینکه فرمان برداری کنه، جیم خودش رو پرت کرد روی کاناپه. And put his hands under the back of his head. و سرش رو گذاشت روی دستاش. And smile. و لبخند زد. دل عزیزم. said he. جیم گفت. Let's put our Christmas present away. بیا هدیه کریسمسمون رو بذاریم کنار. And keep them a while. یه مدتی بهش توجه نکن. They're too nice to use just as a present. اونا خیلی خوشگل تر از اونن که بتونیم ازشون استفاده کنیم. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. برای اینکه بتونم اون شونه ها رو برات بخرم ساعتم رو فروختم. And now suppose you put the chops on. و حالا پاشو برو و شامو بذار. دوستای گلم این بود از داستان دلا و جیم. حالا کل داستان رو از اول تا آخر به انگلیسی براتون میخونم. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealings implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl, so Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with the sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home, a furnished flat at $8 per week. And In the vestibule below was a letter box into which no letter would go, an electric bottom from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flying to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessors was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. There always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many happy hours she has spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. In this mirror, Della could see himself in this mirror every day. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color with 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Young in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the airshaft, Della would have let her hair hang out of the window some day to dry just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed just to see him pluck at his bird for envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown water. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she fluttered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat, with a whirl of skirt and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Ma'am Sofroni, her goods of all kind. One flight up Della ran and collected himself, panting. Madam, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked at Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sigh at the look of it. Down rippled the brown casket. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, Della said. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the store for him, for his present. She found it at last, a truly happy made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, probably proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by mirages or ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value, the description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be probably anxious about the time in any company. He sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 30 minutes, her head was covered with tiny close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a cornelian chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made. The frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on a corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his steps on the stairway, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit for saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious, poor fellow. He was only 22, and to be burdened with a family, he needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. I'll grow up out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me. For it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my hair were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness. "But nobody could never count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician for a wit would give you the wrong answer. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it up on the table. "Don't make any mistake, Del," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers unnamed tore at the string and paper, and then a scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysteric tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lords of the flats. For they laid the comb, the set of combs side and back that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jeweled rims just a shade to wear the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned. Simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the hair was gone. But she hugged them to the bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and said, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little sighing cat and cried, "Oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection over her bright and ardent spirits. "Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over the town to find it. You'll have to look at it this time, and you'll have to look at it 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks like on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on a couch and put his hand under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just a present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your comb, and now suppose you put the chops on." دوستای نازنینم، این بوده از قصه هدیه سال نو. امیدوارم که این قصه رو دوست داشته باشید. اگر که اولین بار هست به کانال یوتیوب ما میای، حتما کانال رو سابسکرایب کن. دکمه زنگ رو بزن تا ویدیو جدید برای شما اطلاع رسانی بشه. این ویدیو رو حتما چند بار ببین و تمرین کن. اگر سوالی داشتی در بخش کامنت برام بنویس. نظراتت رو هم در بخش کامنت برام بنویس. ممنون که تا انتهای ویدیو با ما همراه بودید. خدا نگهدار.